من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Alhamdulillah. This has been really delightful for me. I'm really so pleased with the spirit that everybody brings and with the level of knowledge of everyone. It's very exciting. Alhamdulillah. I mean, spectacular. So I just wanted to say that to start with. So maybe we could start today with maybe any questions. I don't want to spend a long time on questions, so maybe quick questions, but some quick discussion, or maybe clarification of anything that we went through yesterday. Is there anything that we... I understand that a lot of what I presented yesterday was kind of trying to put a larger picture together from a lot of little pieces. And so for some of you, it may have seemed fragmented. Sometimes when I lecture, actually I've given lectures in the past where I've informed people before I begin the lecture that they should, if they expect something linear in terms of progression in the lecture, they should just maybe give up right now. And that that I'm a poet, and this will be a poetic lecture, and I'll give a statement here, and a statement here, and a statement there, and a statement here, and a statement there. And if you find a relation from them, it might move something within you. I mean, after all, Quran is somewhat like that in itself. So there's a power to that kind of expression, I believe, of information and of knowledge. And there's a quality of that corresponds to the way Allah has designed the creation. Basically, that's what happens with us in our day. That's why I say everybody is a poet in essence, because everybody experiences the events of their life in a day, and they either see correspondences or they don't. But the discovery of it is the kind of coming together of these pieces, and it gives a vitality and a life to the understanding and the living of the experiencing. Does that make sense? So anyway, based on that, the little pieces in the fragmented aspect that of some of the stuff I presented yesterday, I'm trying to fill in a general sense of some particular concepts, ideas, and principles. So based on that, are there any questions about things that were not made clear yesterday? And I want to reiterate some of the stuff I put on the board today. I want to reiterate some concepts about observing and experiencing the world elementally, in an elemental way, being connected elementally to the creation. So questions first of all. Yeah.
Could you share more with us about how you actually learned? What were the ingredients of your education? What was the teaching style? Mm-hmm. What was your typical day like? Were you taken out into nature? Mm-hmm. And what did you learn about the classic way of teaching in the student-teacher relationship, mm-hmm. as opposed to the university?
Well, like I said, I've had fortunate. The question was, what kind of style did I learn? You know, it's been different in different places, and I really have to say I've had many teachers.
Maybe you can share. I'd like to hear about your teacher in Pakistan.
Pakistan. Well, like I said, the teacher in Pakistan was something. I went to Pakistan hoping to find a traditional model that was informed with what I would consider real wisdom, that corresponded with the kind of wisdom I was finding in Islam and in Sufism, something that was really very deep. And I wanted to find a medicine that sort of seemed to be connected to that tradition. And I was extremely disappointed when I could not find it. And when I found that most of the Hakims are what they call in Pakistan Neem Hakims, half Hakims, or people who really are in it for the either the sense of power or position of power, or for the money, or I even met people who were taking antibiotics and putting them in traditional medicines and giving them to their clients. So I was pretty disappointed, and it was pretty ruthless on some level. But by Allah's generosity, I was able to find a teacher that I felt was genuine. So, in that case, what I mentioned yesterday is that he really devoted as much time as I wanted to sitting with him all day, every day. And sometimes one day we went, as I said, almost 10 hours through the day when Karachi was flooded. But So the relationship with him was pretty straightforward. I'd sit down with him every day. We would go through the notes from his grandfather, who was Nizamuddin from Ajmer, and he was a Hakim in Ajmer. Ajmer is where Muinuddin Chisti's maqam is, and
Is that Nizamuddin Awliya?
no, not Nizamuddin Awliya, Nizamuddin. But this was a Nizamuddin who is also very well respected as a Hakim in Ajmer. And there's a story about him and his servant when the British came with the troops to occupy Ajmer for the first time. And the city, the people of the city, the populace said, well, you know, there's nothing we can do because there was such a force coming. He and his servant dressed in their ihram from Hajj and went to the edge of the city to meet them in battle and to defend Ajmer, and of course the entire city then joined behind them. So that tradition of them being warriors was still present a bit. But I really believe that. I think the healer is a warrior, and I really believe the person of knowledge is a warrior in the age in which we live. And the warrior, you know, one is a warrior of courage, that is, of strength that comes from the heart. So that's the kind of warrior one has to be in the age in which we live, because that's the only thing that can cut through this enormous tangle and enormous mess that we find ourselves in nowadays. It's the only thing that has the clarity. So I sat with my teacher, you know, daily. We saw clients, and I learned from seeing clients and seeing how he worked with each client. And then we sat and you know, he translated from his grandfather's notes and from his grandfather's books. One of the things that he was a master of the Mufaradat, as I said, and the one thing that he taught, I'll reiterate this, was that the Rahmah, the more connected you are to the Rahmah, the better your medicine will be. The more you trust in the Rahmah of Allah. And one of the stories, I know some of you have heard my lectures before, or maybe seen tapes. Any of you, is there anybody who hasn't heard the story about my experience when I first discovered some of the principles of Rahmah about the worm? The client with the worm? Okay, I'll tell you the story. When I was in England and I was reading, I think his name is Hughes, a British herbalist. And this British herbalist, I believe his name is Hughes, I've forgotten, it's been a long time now. His principle was that if there was an illness in an area, the plant that was needed to heal that illness would be also present. In other words, as the disease entity grew up and came forth in a place, the plant, by Allah's generosity and mercy, that would be needed and used would also come forth at the same time. And so in his principle, if you notice in the season, particularly if you're in the country like where I am, you'll find certain plants come forth, and every week or every month you'll find this is the month for the chicory, for example. Right. The next month, this is the month for the chamisa. That will be true here as well. We are not exempted from this. This morning we went out, yes, Mohammed, we went out and we listened to the birds. And the birds did EMDR for us. You all know EMDR? We had a bird over here going, and then we had one over here going, and then one going, was going right, left. EMDR is a method, a modern method for dealing with trauma that has to do with exciting one side of the brain and another side of the brain. And it's done by eyes and it's done by sound. But Allah does this all the time. If you watch, He does it all the time. Crickets will do it. Chirp, 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 chirp. And it's by Allah, it's not this is naturally present in Allah's creation. So we were doing EMDR with the birds today. So likewise here, the same thing, the plants that are needed will come forth as diseases. So I was studying this in London, this principle. So if there's an epidemic of hepatitis, there'll be certain yellow flowers that come forth and even grow out of the cracks in the pavement in the cities. So this is a principle. So I was studying this and reading his belief about this, and someone came to my door. I was living in London. He came to my door and he had this envelope and he had kind of a gray color to his face, and he said, maybe you can help me. I found this in my stool, and it was a worm. It was a round worm, about so long. And he was, he didn't feel good about it, And I looked at it and I said, well, I don't know what it is, but I'll find out and see what I can do. Because I'd begun accepting the fact that people were coming to me for help, and accepted this, thing of practicing medicine, which I had been hesitant to accept. But by that time I was beginning to say, well, maybe I need to do something. So I said, I will find out what this is. And like I said, this is in London, so I had this great resources. Went to the Wellcome Institute, incredible medical library, and discovered that this was a roundworm. Roundworm in itself. I mean, if you study the life cycle of the roundworm, anybody know the life cycle of the roundworm? It's awesome. I mean, it is awesome. For the roundworm to actually develop to a place where from larva to a full-grown worm in the intestine of the human being, the cycle and the things that it has to go through, it is awesome to look at. It's miraculous. Anyway, that's another whole story in itself. It's as miraculous as being able to stand on one foot, right? So it was a roundworm. I looked at it and said, okay, well, and then I went to the books about herbs, and I said, okay, this is England. What's appropriate for this? And I decided that the best plant for this for him would be male fern. Male fern, anybody know male fern? The herb male fern? It's a vermifuge. That is, it'll drive out worms. So I thought, well, that's the thing. So I went to the herb shop. Do you have male fern? No male fern. I said, okay, so it's not a popular herb, even though if you read the old books from England, it's the one most, it's one that should be around. So I thought, okay, I'll go to the nursery. Went to the nursery. Do you have any male fern? I'd get actually the living plant. No male fern, no male fern. Went to another nursery, no male fern. So I thought, well, okay, in the nursery they said, well, if you drive about 60 miles north of London, there's an area that male fern grows and you could get that. And I thought, well, okay, I'd have to drive 60 miles north, so maybe we should try cayenne or, wormwood or we should try some other plant. And so I spent the day searching out, and went back to my house, and I'm opening the door where this man and I had originally set with this little envelope. I'm opening the door, and it's London, where you have these hallways and many apartments and then doors up the stairways and windows to the outside. And as I'm opening this door, I notice out of the corner of my eye at this window, at the corner crack on the bottom of this window, there's something green. And I look, and what's that? I look closely again, and I see that it's got this funny little curve. And of course it is the male fern. And I had been reading this book saying, yes, the plant you need, and I realized, subhanAllah, this is a sign. This is a sign of Allah's rahmah. In other words, if I could have said to the man, the first green thing you can grab, the first green thing you see closest vicinity to you, take it, and by Allah, it will be your, if I'd known that. So that was one lesson. The other thing that happened to me is that my teacher was, as I said yesterday, he was a master of what's called the mufaradat, giving a single, simple thing. He would say to one person, you eat dates and you'll be fine. Another, he'd say, you eat almonds, you'll be fine. And then he would have, he had clients that came from all over Pakistan, from little villages and places in the mountains, et cetera, et cetera. And these people would come from their particular village, and if they lived in a particular area that had a particular plant the area was noted for, he would say to them, you live in such and such a place, can you bring me such and such a plant when you come next time? And that's often the way they would pay him, would be to bring the herb that their area was special for. So, they'd come and they'd bring him the package and they'd greet each other, how are you doing? And they'd come for, some medicine as well, but they would also bring him a plant or something from their area. So they'd give it to him, and he'd put it in the room next door. And then the next client would come, and what started happening, I noticed that the people would come, and then the next client would come, and they'd give him what was going on. They'd tell him what was wrong, and he'd go into the room and he'd grab this first thing that was there, and I'd think, he's just giving them this random plants that take some of this and you'll be all right. It's all placebo. And then I started reading, and I discovered that the plants he was giving, they were, by the books, they were indicated for and I realized, subhanAllah, the remedy's coming before the patient. And then this is the principle of realizing this is all designed by Allah. Everything, every single thing that happens to us in our day, as random that as it may seem, is by the design of Allah. Is it not? Every leaf that falls whenever. This is something we must not forget this. And if you're going to find medicine, if you're going to find healing, if you're going to function in the world with the recognition of what this whole thing of being alive is about, we have to remember that. And remembering it in your day, in our day, as we move through the day. And when we're realizing in each person that we meet, however strange they may be, whoever they may, whatever language, from whatever place, whether they're Muslim and they're not Muslim, whoever they are, whatever they are, that by Allah, they're designed for our encounter. And we can take as much as we can, or we can shut it down and say, well, you know. Right? So, you know, I remember teaching, I gave the same lesson, the one I'm giving you right now, talking about right now, the rahmah of Allah. And I remember there was a friend of mine who was he's a Spanish doctor, and he wanted to learn about medicine. We were in Arizona, and we went out. The other thing I really recommend is collecting plants and herbs and foods yourself. Really going out into nature and Allah's creation and doing that. And I've always done that with my students wherever I've been. I'm getting carried away, I know, from what my teacher taught, but it was a jumping off place. I was in this, but this is teaching principles here. When I was in Arizona, I went out with a Spanish physician, and we went to the university. And the university had incredible dates and incredible olives. They had date palms, and we got dates from date palms. They had olives, huge olives, and no pesticides used on the campus. So they had also saw palmetto berries. Anybody know herbals? You guys know. They had really succulent, beautiful, fresh saw palmetto berries. And if you go to the herb shops, you get these sort of dried black, pretty much dead ones. And so we were collecting saw palmetto berries, and saw palmetto berries are right, herbalists here. Traditionally they're used for prostate pain, urinary tract, things like that. And my friend collected a whole bottle of these because I was teaching him. Part of the thing I was saying is, you want to learn natural medicine. Part of what you have to do is connect to nature. You have to go out and look at the herbs, find the herbs, take them. You have to make the medicine yourself. You have to touch it. You have to see it. You have to smell it. You have to be with it. You have to recognize this whole event of the mercy of Allah in its whole pattern. You have to connect with it. Do it. And so he collected this beautiful big jar. And, what is he going to do with a big jar of saw palmetto berries? Carry them back to Spain? So he decided he was going to take them and give them to the local herb shop that had these dried up little black ones, so they have a good supply. So he's in his car. And we just had this discussion about the rahmah, the mercy of Allah, and I told him a story about the worm and a few other, my teacher said, look, I've seen people, I've gone to people's houses and they have the plant they need. There's a woman in California that I saw recently, and she needed, in terms of a plant that would help her, a muscle relaxant, a heart regulator, a muscle relaxant, passiflora, the flower passiflora, that would have benefited her. She had it growing on the front of her house, covering her house, like it was so intense, like it was going to grab her house and just pull it down, Passiflora growing. So I've seen it in the potted plant next to the sick person in their bed. So I told the man, here's the Spanish physician, he's got this big jar of saw palmetto berries, he puts it on the seat of his car, he's driving to the herb shop to give it to these herbalists, and he picks up a hitchhiker. The hitchhiker, he says, get in, and he says, excuse me, just put that on the floor or something. So the hitchhiker puts this jar of saw palmetto berries there between his legs, and he says, they have a conversation. He says, I'm a physician. He says, you're a physician. He said, well, maybe you can help me. I have this pain, in my prostate, kind of. You have any suggestions of what I might be able to? And he's saying, okay, Allah, I get the lesson. So I spent time with him, but I also saw these things, with him. And, the Sufi tradition and the Islamic tradition is very strong on this principle of transmission, the idea of transmission of knowledge. You know, I went once to Morocco with another man. He was a son of a famous psychiatrist in London, and we went to visit someone in Morocco who was most renowned as what they call jinn chasers. Did anybody know that? Do we have any Moroccans here? Jinn chasers are the people who exorcise jinn from people. They call them jinn chasers. And there was a man whose name was Mulli Muhammad who was, he lived in the wall of Fez. His family had been there for almost 1,000 years. And he was the most renowned jinn chaser in Morocco. And so this man was, you know, he was a psychologist. I was, you know, I wanted to learn about medicine. And so he and I together went to seek out Mulli Muhammad. We wanted to get from him to see if he could teach us about chasing jinn and get the idhan. Anybody know this term, idhan?
Haunted.
Idhan?
Jinn shaking haunted.
Idhan. Idhan is, do you all know this term, idhan? Like in English it would be I-D-H-N. It's the same root as adhan. You know, the adhan is permission. When the adhan is called, it's actually permission. It's saying you have permission now to make the salah, the adhan. But idhan is something that you're given in the Sufic tradition. Idhan is something you're given. It's kind of like license. In other words, you don't decide. You don't. Yeah, idhan. It's like license. And so it's like a permission in a sense, but also idhan is something that's passed. So they say, you know, if you go to a sheikh who is a teacher by durs, by speaking, that if you get idhan from that, if it's passed from you, originally from the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if it's passed from that sheikh to you and you're given idhan to speak, people will be there to listen. That's a sign of having the idhan. But it's kind of like not from the nafs or the ego you make these decisions, but by someone else who says, okay, I give you the idhan. It's like different than a degree. Idhan is a little different than that. So it's the transmission, and it's the permission that comes from a series and lineage of teachers that's given. So we went to get the idhan from this man in Morocco who was a jinn chaser. We went to visit him. We told him, we've come to see, will you give us the idhan? Will you teach us about chasing and exorcising jinn? And he said, Bismillah, Bismillah. I said, so we had tea, we sat and we talked. We didn't talk about anything to do with jinn. We talked a little bit about, we talked something about the jinn and about some of the procedures, but not much. We had tea, we sat some more, we had some cakes, some other people came to visit. They left, we talked a little bit more about the jinn, not much. The day was finished. He said, Alhamdulillah, thank you for coming. You know, and was sending us on our way. And he's sending us on our way. And he said, well, what about the idhan? And he said, oh, the idhan, it was in the tea. So it was like an idhan, but he also meant that, you know, what he was also saying is that there's also a certain kind of transmission. And there's the belief that you can actually transmit information in a physical manner. This is something, this institution is not going to be big on this subject. Right? So, you know, sweeping the floor of your teacher, but being there present in his room, in his house, and serving him may be the way in which you get the seeds of barakah in yourself that will sprout into the knowledge that that same person has. And it will have a strange affinity in detail and in specific. Are you with me? You know, and then there's a belief that the milk of the mother to the child does the same thing. So yeah, being with him was a big part of the teaching. And I feel the same way about all the teachers I've had. Sitting with them was part of it. Touching them. They say the glance from the eye will transmit. So there was that, and there was a certain amount of detailed information, writing information that took place. So, you know, and when I was in Santa Barbara, I did learn physical diagnosis from my doctor friend that I worked with, who was an MD. And that was how they use a stethoscope, how to recognize the diseased entities, what's the signs of pneumonia, and just this sort of mainstream medicine. And that was by practice with clients, seeing them in person. So, I've been fortunate in having one-on-one relationships with my teachers, I must say. And not everybody has the chance to do that. But, and certainly the institutions are invaluable. But the institution in Islam, historically, the institution is person to person to person, traditionally. So that's one question. Sorry.
You talked about how there is no quote-unquote prophetic medicine, but that the prophet's medicine had to do with inspiration. I don't know if you could talk about that.
Yeah, well, again, on one hand, there's no prophetic medicine. On the other hand, what I need to clarify in that sense is that all of the prophets bring medicine. They are the medicine. I mean, they do bring the medicine. And with our Prophet ﷺ, Quran was one of his biggest medicines. But he himself, what I've emphasized, was also the other aspect, the Quran and the Sunnah. The Sunnah is him. So those are the two big medicines that he brought. And every one of the prophets do bring a medicine. They are the medicine. And in many cases, they reiterate the message that the messengers before them have brought, or they bring a new Sharia. But that is the medicine. So in all aspects of it, it's medicine. It's not just the inspiration. What I was focusing on, wanted to underline yesterday, was that was an important part. And just like today, when I told you the story about the worm, right? I could feel the state that you went into from that. It was recognizing a truth that we know inherently, but we forget, don't we? That Allah designs every single little thing. Now, we came to a moment of realization of that, didn't we? Together, yes? That's what we want to get to. We want to get to a place where the Quran says, when you forget, remember. We want to get to the place where we're constantly remembering the truth. Not formulaically, not by reiterating something, a hadith or a Quran, not by just repeating something in a form, really, really remembering. Look at the term, remembering. Remember. What does it mean? Literally. I mean, it's not dhikr. Dhikr has its own meaning, but we use remembering as a somewhat of a somewhat accurate translation. But remembering is kind of like getting your arms and legs back, isn't it? Or like, one of our groups missing, the member comes in, remembering. It's the pieces coming back together and becoming whole. So the prophets brought medicine. They were all healers. And the thing is that the Prophet ﷺ, his medicine was so pure that the physician said, how do I practice here? And he ﷺ said, we have this great medicine, which is 1/3 food, 1/3 water, and 1/3 nothing. If we could really undertake the task of doing what we know. My teacher said, if you tell people everything they already know, they'll consider you to be this brilliant person. Like, thanks a lot. Well, you know all this. I mean, people can sit down with me and I say, well, blah, 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 blah. And they say, yes. And I said, well, okay, so you know all that already, right? You know this is good food. You know this makes you healthy. You know you shouldn't do that. You know you should do that. So what's up? And that's the bottom line. So that's why we need each other to remind each other of the truth, to bring each other back to the truth. We need each other for support and assistance. And wallahi, we need each other to change our state. I tell couples who have really good marriages, I love to see people who have good marriages. And I've studied it for years because I had such a difficult time myself getting it right. I still haven't gotten it right because I'm not married. But I learned, alhamdulillah, in the process, and I made a lot of effort to understand it. I looked, okay, these people, they have, and then I'd sit with them, well, what about this? What kind of testing and scratching this, how is it? And I discovered, wallahi, alhamdulillah, I discovered marriages that were really solid and deep and beautiful, alhamdulillah. And I learned some of the secrets of what brought that about. And when I see people who have that potential, I get scared because I know that if they're going to sustain that and if it's going to work, it must grow. Right? It must grow. And the only way it will grow for most of them is they have to learn. Learning and growth are the same thing. Yes? Growth and learning, right? I mean, is not real learning growth? I mean, when the Prophet ﷺ, he said, seek knowledge from the cradle to the grave. He didn't mean get more information, right? He meant get knowledge. And what is knowledge? Al-Ghazali, what does Al-Ghazali say knowledge is? Anyone? Huh? Nur. Not ilm, nur. It's light. It illumines and it enables you to see. Knowledge is knowing by seeing. And real knowledge that we integrate and we make part of ourselves means we change. And if it's more, if we change by increasing our knowledge, by increasing what we see by the nur of Allah, we grow. That's growth. So relationships must grow. That's real knowledge. And I worry when I see people who have good potential and good relationship because I know that they must find the tools that enable them not to stay the way it is, because it won't work. It can't stay the way it is. We can't stay the way we are. We must grow. In most cases, people need to get something outside of their recycling self. We need help from each other, and most of us need help from the outside to enable that growth and to break the pattern of recycling that actually recycles eventually, not from stasis, but recycles downward to something worse than stasis. So what I'm saying, practically speaking, is that you get help from the outside to enable your relationship in a marriage to grow. But it must come from something other than your own recycled self. In many cases, you can be conscious enough that you're really working with each other, but usually most people need some learning that comes from at least information from the outside, if not people. And that is medicine of the Prophet ﷺ. Because he said, he brought it in Quran, it said, Shura. He said, the mu'min is the mirror to the mu'min. The one who knows himself knows his Lord. His medicine was in his hadith. His medicine was in what he did. His medicine was in what he brought, Quran. And this medicine is deep and far-reaching. The thing is, we cannot implement all of it, and we cannot necessarily take all of it into our lifestyle. And much of what would be useful is not useful because we have to be realistic about what's happened to us. I want to get back to reiterating that. We must recognize the impact of this lifestyle that was not present at the time the Prophet was alive, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this first and most important medicine that he, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, referred to, of eating little, if people could do that, the health, one person said, how many people dig their graves with their teeth? It's a powerful statement. The subject we talked about yesterday of not being present in the body and not being aware of sensation is a major element in overeating. People talk about losing weight. People talk about obesity. Folks, don't eat so much. That's it. It's very simple. We know it. And I thank one person. I had one client who enabled me, gave me a secret about gaining weight and losing weight and so forth, and dieting. She was an incredibly beautiful woman who had been a dancer before she became Muslim. And she, when I saw her as a client, was suffering from extreme obesity, over 300 pounds, and problems with her joints because of her weight, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. She had been dieting for years. When I met her, she was eating her diet that she was trying to lose weight with was lettuce, fresh greens, and that's about it. And she still was not losing weight. And she said, I don't know what it is. She said, I eat almost only lettuce and celery all day, and still I cannot lose weight. What's wrong with me? I think it's my metabolism. I think it's my hormones, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, all these things. I did work with her on trauma, did trauma work with her nervous system. And she had incredible grief in her being about having been a dancer. You can imagine the grief, the disappointment in herself for having been a dancer and now being over 300 pounds and losing the use of her joints at this point. And it was a very powerful experience of her coming to this grief and realizing that this happened. But still, here she was. So we finished the session. Then she called me like next day and she said, you know, that session was really wonderful because it gave me a breakthrough. I finally understood and I've got a handle on why all these years of dieting it hasn't been effective and I still gain weight. And I said, what is it? And she said, I lie. Because she'd eat lettuce and salad, but oh yeah, well, okay, this entire Sara Lee cake I'm gonna down right now too. And she'd been doing this for years, staying on the diet and saying to herself, I'm on this diet at the time, and then saying, and I can't seem to lose weight, I'm this special person and something's really wrong with me, I'm not like other people. It's not just a problem of overeating, no, it's something different with me. And she came to recognize that in herself, that she was in denial. So eating less means, it's all to what you take in and what you expend and what you burn up and you put out. Yes, there are differences in metabolism. Yes, there are hormonal realities, thyroid, etc. Yes, all those things are real too. But so often what's mainly and primarily overlooked is that we eat to try to satisfy something other than the needs we have, really, basically, genuinely, and real in a real way. When we are not in touch with our senses, what happens when we eat is we eat, and if we're not really in touch with our senses, at some point we will get to that bite that if we were to eat it, not only is it excess, not only is it not necessary, not only do we not need it, but it is abusive. And if we're in touch with what we're feeling and our sensations designed by Allah to feel that, we will experience the abusiveness of that bite. Do you understand what I'm saying here? There's a point at which like you say, wait, and it's like taking a knife, or it's like self-punishment. And yes, we all have difficulties and struggles, and we have loss. Like I was talking about yesterday, the separation from mother is important. I mean, what is mother if not? Mother is, on some level, mother and food are like the same, yes? And our entire elementary, from here, where we first connect with the breast, this, the taste, the stomach, all of this still relates to, that's why the man, I said yesterday, when mother makes food for him, it's so good because, mother is the source of food in our elemental understanding and sense of reality, still. So when we want more of that, and I know what it is too. I have felt lost from my mother, and I have overeaten many, many times. Is that funny? Me going. So yeah, we want the sweetness that may be missing otherwise in our life, But we also want that thing that we feel nourished, that So this is knowledge of the self. All of you that overeat, most of us overeat, even the skinny ones overeat. Sorry. And we're trying to satisfy that thing, that feeling of emptiness. We're trying to fill that. you know? And we try to fill it with the relation with the husband or the wife too. You know, we try to fill it with each other. But in fact, you know, as Muslims, we believe that Allah holds us closer than our own mother held us in His mercy. But we believe that. We believe that because we've read it. We know that. We see that in our teachings, but we don't necessarily experience that. So one of the goals is try to get to a place. One of the things I've been talking about, a grounding yourself in sensation, coming back to standing, coming back to being present in your body, is a way to begin to feel that in your body, to feel the way in which your body, by Allah, has contained you. So it's far-reaching, this practice I'm suggesting that you take on a regular basis, this practice of becoming aware of sensations in an age in which it's been that is designed to remove them from us, becoming aware of sensations, becoming aware of self, and gaining knowledge of self. And it's not just physical knowledge of the self, it's insight and understanding that come. Yes?
Would you recommend like yoga or meditation?
Any of these things. Yoga is excellent. Pilates, very good. Pilates is beautifully designed, you know. Massage, martial arts, any of these are good, providing they're done with consciousness. You can do any of these things and gain absolutely nothing. You can do all of these things and gain nothing. In fact, you can do all these things, like I say, you can work out with weights and you can like do all kinds of, you can run, you can do all kinds of physical stuff, and you may not gain what you want is this bottom line awareness of self and grasp of the container that you've been put in by Allah. Presence. And that is both supported by dhikr, remembrance of Allah and the truth, you know, and it also generates dhikr at the same time. Do you see? It's by Allah, it's designed. Alhamdulillah. It's all designed for us to happen. Quran says Allah wants for you purification. Yes.
The Prophet is putting the pressure on the stomach too, that will cut down your thirst and hunger.
Yeah.
Like the sunnah.
Well, they used to do that.
The doctors, they try to put a balloon in the stomach to cut down the desire and to intake before they operate and do the bypass surgery and other.
Well, they did with very, very little food, too, and they'd go with almost nothing. I mean, we don't know what it's like. Do you realize that the Prophet ﷺ, I mean, he used to eat like just a piece of bread. I mean, I suggested that to someone the other day. I said, you know, well, what are we going to have for lunch? And I said, let's have a piece of bread. You know, and they said, what do you mean? I said, just let's have a piece of bread. And that's all we really needed that day. I mean, I wasn't out digging ditches. I didn't need, we don't realize we don't need, I mean, we live in a place of such extreme excess, we don't have a clue about what we really need anymore. And we don't know whether we're Chinese eating pizza or we're Asian eating rice and, you know what I mean? It's like this incredible gamut of things. Used to be people ate, you know, 4 or 5, 6 things, and they vary periodically to get a balance. And every once in a while, a special thing. Like I said the other day, I would say, you know, it's rotis and salan, and you know, rotis and some meat sometimes, and rotis and you know, one vegetable maybe, and then maybe some halima if you're, you know, once in a while, special. Some couscous if you're Moroccan. You know what I mean? And that would be it. And they lived to be old, they lived full. I mean, how many people, I've met people from the desert live on dates and milk, and they're healthier than people that have all of the best organic foods with all of the so-called necessary nutriments from whole foods, and they're much healthier. So what's happening? Yeah.
When you're working with clients and, you know, working this idea of nourishment, I mean, ultimately, like I have so many clients who, they know their mom issues, they know their dad issues, are so in their head.
Yeah.
And what they're screaming for is actually to let Allah be their nourishment.
Yes.
How do you make that bridge between the mother, and like Christ said, you have to hit your mother and father and really to come to God. How do you make that bridge, particularly for a non-believer, to allow that mercy to come to them, that nourishment?
What I have seen work, I mean, Allahu alam, I have seen simply teaching them how to stand support that. I mean, there's an impulse and an inclination for that to happen in the first place. One must remember, you have to remember that it's there. They were created by God, and they know that. You know, they were aware of the rahmah that they experienced in the womb. They are aware of the separation from Allah initially. And then the second re-experiencing of separation from the womb. And then the next separation from mom. You know, and the next separation from the family and the community. You know, all of these degrees of it. So what they want to do is regain the sense of connection. So I say, what I have seen, and I'm not saying this is the absolute answer, there's many, many, many possibilities here, but becoming aware of the sensations of your body, being present in your body, provides you with the unconscious sensation and experience of being held. Not by someone else. Yeah, it's wonderful to be held by your spouse, someone you love, and to hold them. But it's also possible to feel held simply by being present and being held by Allah's creation. But you can only do that by being, one, aware of standing, so you actually have the sense of that unconsciously, and aware of your senses so that you know where you end and where the creation, you know. Do you see what I'm saying? So there's a ground, what I want to repeat, this line, I'll repeat it again. Grounding one's experience in sensation. And that's particularly valuable for us in a time in which we have abstracted ourselves from experience. And our experience is abstracted from us. Image, TV, do you see? So it's called coming to your senses. Allah has designed that to be, and then the spiritual practices, then your salat becomes different. The wudu, look at wudu, subhanAllah. One sheikh said, when you make the wudu, what you're doing is besides cleaning yourself, you are sealing the rububiyyah of your being. You're sealing the wholeness, the lordship of your being. You're sealing all of the wholeness of it. The arms, the orifices, the ears, the face. You're sealing it. You're becoming completed and contained, so that you're in a place you're present in your body to pray. One sheikh said, you do wudu so that you're present, so that when you're praying you experience. Then again, you are, boom, boom, on the earth, on the ground, on the planet we're on, designed by Allah for this period of time in our history of mankind. It's not a prayer in our mind, No. Yes, the recitation of Quran also has its physical effects, but existentially, our practices are existential actions of submission, but also of grounding. 7 points, ground on the earth. And if you're Maliki, which is I am, you do it on the earth. And I prefer doing it, on the grass and on the ground. And the Prophet ﷺ left the dirt on his forehead when he prayed. So even the non-Muslims, even they are capable of achieving more of a sense of being held and contained within themselves. And to beginning by observing sensation, to begin to regulate and manage their experiences on their own. And then if they're fortunate enough to have a teaching, a spiritual teaching that can support an understanding of the jalal and the jamal, the majestic and the beautiful, and the opposites, or the complementary experiences of life, the joy and the sorrow. And they can begin to recognize that they contain both of those things in their life, that this is life itself. There will always be joy and there will be sorrow. And I know non-Muslims, and they said this, and one of them said, they were Hindus, and one was saying to this woman, well, so what do we do with the joy, the extreme joy and the extreme sorrow? How do we manage that? And she said, well, just realize that they're both held in the same place, in your being. And that is the nature of this, that's it. We are, Jalal and Jamal. It's beauty and majesty. Terrible, majestic realities and absolute sublime beauty. Conflict does not exist without peace. Peace does not exist without conflict. And with ourselves as well. So that's beginning to contain that. Then feeling whole. And then, what I was talking about yesterday is beginning to become alive. That's feeling a sense of fullness because the life is flowing from you. Feeling a sense of fullness in your being is the only way you can have love and experience love with other people. That you have enough love to give out. It's not something you get. We all know that. Yes, it's something we want. And it's something we often feel we miss. But the food is not going to fill it. The other person is not really going to fill it. We can be full enough to give out from it. Fulfilled. Fulfilled to overflowing is how the best relationships happen. So yes, it's beautiful, it's wonderful, what a gift to have that other person. But, one needs to feel full in oneself. The more full one feels in oneself, the more. So that's the bridge, I believe. But it's experiential. You have to feel full, you have to feel whole. And part of health is feeling whole. So that's why I say the prophets' medicine was all of the prophets, peace be upon them all, they all brought medicine. That's who they were. They were the healers for us. And we'd get sick to a certain period of degree as groups and civilizations, and then Allah designed it. And He designs it now too, so that particular, even after the Prophet ﷺ, after his passing in the world, so that periodically people come to renew the truth of our teaching, to bring it back alive again. And where do these teachers come from? Where did the prophets come from? Huh? Well, Allah designs it, but from whom do they come from? Amongst who they come from? Us. They are us. They come from us. لَقَدْ جَاءَكُمْ رَسُولٌ مِّنْ أَنفُسِكُمْ. From Allah sends the prophets from amongst ourselves, and that is an indication that this is who we are. Aqsani taqwim. On a grant, we are designed like the Prophet ﷺ was designed. Allahu Akbar. We cannot belittle and underestimate. So we have these capabilities in ourselves. And even, and everyone has it by the virtue of their being human being. Incredibly designed by Allah. So the Prophet's medicine, if we could begin, we talk about following his sunnah, but we're so far away from it. We don't have a clue often. Like I say, you realize he ate usually one thing. Right? Anybody really familiar with the traditionally with the customs actually of how he ate, sallallahu alaihi wasallam? He ate, like I said, a piece of bread. He didn't eat, we know from nutrition, we learn there's salad and what they call the well-balanced, but it's not, it's not true, is it? Maybe he'd eat some dates and some milk. That's complicated, but like 4 or 5 things? No, it's really very simple. Very simply. So it's hard for us to do that. And it's hard for us to extricate ourselves from what's around us. To be honest, I go to, Le Bon Pain, whatever it's called. We could say it's a nice place, but I look at it and think, my God, what am I going to eat here? Sorry, but... And to be honest, if I go to get vegetables, I drove through the Fresno Valley. Who knows the Fresno Valley, the Central Valley of California? Used to be it used to be the place where all the fruit and all the vegetables came. It still does, except if you drive through there. Now, last time I drove through there, I was with some Mexican Muslims, and we stopped at a stand, stand on the side of the road. I wept. Because the food, and then because I looked at the food, I smelled the food, I didn't even bother tasting it because it was dead. And then I looked at the fields around me and I got the sense of what was happening. It was tragic. And what is happening there is what's happening here. It's a metaphor, it's a reflection. What's happening when people go to McDonald's and they live off, they go up and they drive up and they eat food in their car. Well, some of us do too. I'm not criticizing, but I'm saying you have to realize that that's the state of people. You go to the supermarket and it's all processed food, it's all synthetic flavors, it's all vegetables and fruits that are dead, that have no flavor and no smell. I don't think they'd even rot if you gave them the chance to rot. I was telling one brother the other day that in New Mexico, I have a friend that grows cows and sheep, grows them organically. And what they do nowadays, I don't know if you know, the health department comes to test, to see that the animals, and one of the things they do is they take a little slice from the liver of one of the animals and they put it in an incubator, then they seal the incubator with a little seal. And then they come back, a certain period of time later, a couple of weeks later. Does anybody know about this process? And you know what they're looking for? Bacteria. They're looking for decay. And if it doesn't decay, if it's the same as when they left, they'll quarantine because there's so much antibiotics pumped into the animals that the thing doesn't even rot. It won't even break down. It won't go bad. And if you're putting that into your body? So, yeah. So the Prophet ate little, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, slept little. But here's what I tell people too. I mean, sleep is another way of avoiding and a way of managing, if life is too difficult. If you live life so that it is a joy, your sleep will be sound. You'll want to get up in the morning. If you don't want to get up in the morning, you have to look at why is it I don't want to face what's out there. If you're very active, you have to learn how to rest between breaths. Yesterday I was saying that we have that when you take a breath in, everything charges up in the nervous system, and when you breathe out, everything discharges. So in the Quran it says in the alternation of night and day, there's a hikmah, right? And that reality, the sun, here's the metaphor. The sun, as it rises into the sky, illumines the world, charges up everything. In the mornings, the cicadas and the crickets are going like that. In the midday, the cicadas are... You all know cicadas? I love cicadas. When it starts getting warm, they start clicking. And when it gets really hot, they're just raving, right? I love this sound of cicadas. One of the most beautiful, any case. So the sun comes up, the birds are out, the flowers open, all the activity in the world reaches a peak in the midday, and as the sun starts going down, it starts to gradually loosen, settle, discharge, and night comes. And the metaphor of that is every breath we take is like a sun rising into our being, our senses of coming awake, contraction of muscles, charge of nervous system, right? Flowers opening in the flow through our body. And when we exhale, it goes out. And when we breathe, right? It's like the tsunami. When it hit in South Asia, right? Those waves reached here. Okay? Right? Does anybody know that and experience that? Experience it and recognize it when it happened? We felt it emotionally. Some people not only felt it emotionally, but they could actually feel it physically and see it. See the kind of, smell it almost. It's one entity. It's a whole, like I say, our deen points to unity. Tawheed, wholeness of being. Health, oneness. Unity of community. Bani Adam, one family. Coming together, making whole. The earth is whole. Everything that happens, like the butterfly wing, the wave that follows from the flapping of the butterfly wing. But the tsunami, it was clear. I was in Southern California when it hit, and it was pretty obvious. And I don't care what the meteorologists say, what the physicists say. It was there. It hit. The wave continued. Came right through the air and knocked the tree down in front of the house I was living in and smashed an SUV so it was this high off the ground. So the same thing happens with our breath, or wants to happen with our breath. With every breath we take in, actually the wave, it fills, the diaphragm moves down, the lungs fill, it moves up into the shoulders, the head moves, wants to move, the entire body responds. There's a wave from the breath that wants to go through the upper body, out through the arms, and then finally down through the legs and discharge. Breathe in, it's like the sun rising in the sky. Everything contracts, more excitement comes up, the nervous system charged, the nipples become more sensitive, the ears perk up, the eyes, everything fills your body, and then flows out. And there's a wave, if you could identify it, if you could demark it, you could see this wave. So, I mean, people that dance, or people that do Tai Chi work with the sense of this. If they're good at what they teach and what they do, they work with this thing that's there all the time, that wants to flow and move. So I thought one of the exercises, is this time for an exercise? It's not, is it? I thought we would just do a little bit of standing and breathing for a little bit here. Can we do that? It's not precisely medicine of the prophet, but it is. It is because what I'm trying to do is get us to a place where we can recognize what he did, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what he brought and where he was at. But we have to recover certain things. So let's do the standing thing. Did anybody do any standing exploration based on what we did yesterday after they left? I hope. This morning, did you? Any comments or discoveries about that? Any comments or discoveries about that? Knees? Yeah. You felt more relaxation with your knees? Yeah. Well, okay, this, like I said, this is something you can practice every day. This just standing and consciously focusing on getting the streaming back into your legs. You can also, this one, you know, if you do that one, we're not going to do that one now, but I'm saying this one is a very powerful one, and you should do it enough so that actually you get some stinging, you know, and that's it. It'll bring the circulation, but it awakens the nerves and parts that have shut down. See, what happens is that with the trauma and with the experiences of life, what we do is whole areas shut down. And when we do trauma therapy, where we actually release the trauma, whole areas wake up and they come out of what's called a freeze state. So it's called thaw. And when you have thaw, it feels like this. It feels like there's a certain amount of, it's a waking up. So very often when people do trauma therapy, they have this suddenly waves of heat, and there'll be actually a thawing, and they'll suddenly feel more sensation in their back than they did before. And then they realize, oh, well, their back had been shut down for years. Whole areas of sensation shut down. Whole areas of sensation. So I'm talking about coming to our senses. I'm talking about coming back to life in terms of feeling and being present with sensation. I'm reiterating these things just over and I want to keep underlining these statements. Okay? So let's get the streaming back into the legs, right? Start feeling the pressure in the legs. And if there's any shakiness, remember that the shakiness is streaming and the returning of the chi or the vital force back into the legs that is not ordinarily there, which means you've probably become accustomed to standing with your knees locked and actually shutting off that flow from the waist down. Okay? Right? Everybody understand what I just said? So if it feels unnatural and you feel unsteady, recognize, okay, that's because you've gotten into this other habit. This habit of rigidifying from the waist down. So let's do something different here. Again, let's think about this thing I was talking about, the breath, about how the breath wants to go up and form the head and the neck and the shoulders, and it wants to flow as a wave right out through the arms, and when you exhale, flow down. When you breathe in, everything contracts, even little capillaries, and when you exhale, they relax and open up. So a really successful exhale is relaxing. That's why I say people need to learn to relax between breaths or during breaths. Okay? So you weren't here for this. So if you feel like doing this, standing with your legs bent a little bit, 6 inches apart, and your knees just unlocked. Okay? Body upright, arms relaxed. So let's do this. Now what I'm going to suggest we do is just gently, let's see if we can get a rhythm together. Okay, now wait, let's not start the rhythm. I want to do a little bouncing so that I'll make the sound and you can follow the sound I'm making. And let's make this sound with the breath and keep your head loose when you make the sound and feel the sound as it comes from your chest and is spoken. And I want you to make a sound, something like this if it's okay, like keep it. Listen to the sound, keep going. Do what everybody's doing. Try to stay with everybody else, the same sound. If you're used to doing something like this, see if you can modify it so it fits the group. Try to get it going in unison. Listen to the whole group. Let your shoulders go loose. Let your head go relaxed so your head responds. Look at me. Make the sound as your breath comes in if you can. If you can't, but at least make a good solid sound that's part of the group as it comes out. Relax in the upper body so the breath can move up into your head. Feel the weight. Continue. Keep going. Now make it stronger. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. Okay, I want you to stop now and notice what you feel in your body. Notice what you feel in your body. Notice you feel in your legs. I see people smiling. So any comments? What do you feel in your arms? What do you feel in your body? What do you feel generally? Pardon me? Your back hurt a little bit. Okay, that means there was some tension in your back. What you want to do is have your back relaxed so there's not tension. Any other? Yes? Okay, a little bit of lightheadedness. The lightheadedness comes from experiencing more oxygen than they're used to. In other words, waking up. Okay, but on the whole, look at how easily everybody's laughing. Now, on one hand, you might think, well, we're laughing because what we did was kind of silly at a certain level. Kind of strange. Huh? High, huh? Tingles, and that's the same thing. That's the oxygenation. That's more oxygen coming. When we do this, if you do a lot of breathing, you will experience lightheadedness and tingling, and people say, oh, you're hyperventilating. What really is happening most typically there is you're breathing more than you're used to. Okay? Breathing and feeling go together. Breathing and feeling go together. Breathing and feeling go together. When you stop breathing and you shut down your breathing, and you limit your breathing, the less you breathe, the less you feel. What happens when feeling arises that overwhelms us? We weep or we sob in waves. Like I said, the same wave that wants to inform our breath and run through our body, the same wave that exists in the creation of the rise and fall of the sun. That wave comes in waves, and we may sob if overwhelming emotions come. And what happens is we let go. If we really sob successfully and fully. But it's that wave that's the same wave of life that comes. Or it comes when we laugh and it's really funny. Same, waves. Orgasm, same, waves. It's when this impulse of life starts filling and flowing through us. That's why people dance. You know? I'm not going to do my Busta Rhymes today. But that's why people dance. They're trying to get in touch with these things. They're trying to get in touch with this. And people who dance well have, if they're good dancers, it's something that flows through them naturally. What they call the natural sense of rhythm, right? It's the rhythm that's there, a sense of it, a flowing of it. So notice if you feel pretty good, right? Just from that little bit of getting the flow, restoring that flow of life through the body. Okay? So, in the Quran it says Allah sends the water, the rain from the heaven, and brings the dead earth to life. The Prophet ﷺ used to go out at the first spring, in the rains, and he would stand in the rain and get wet with it. And say, Subhanallah, this is rahmah from Allah. I recommend that. I really recommend it. Wherever you are, you know, when the rain comes, I mean, unless it's really, really cold, but particularly in the spring, when it's warm enough, and the rain comes, go out and get wet. Take the water and put it on your face. Taste it. Be with it. Feel it. And feel what it does to your body. Quran says it brings the dead earth to life. This is earth, and and our health is the life of this earth, of our body. The mud that we're made from. The death of it is the ill health. Health of the body is bringing the stuff to life. And all the things that bring it to life are the things that give us most health. That's why what I'm talking about yesterday, the food that comes from mom, the food that comes from eating together with love and joy and excitement and inspiration, good feelings, that's life, you know? Rotis, you know the tanur, you know that bread? That bread is beautiful, live, nourishing bread because it's, boom, there's heat, you reach in there with the hooks and you bring them out and it's like almost alive in itself. You almost expect those things when they come out to get up and sort of run down the street on their own, right? And they're crispy and crunchy. You all know what I'm talking about, right? The ones that know that. That's light. You see, that's not measurable in terms of ingredients unless you begin to measure the whole process surrounding it. So remember, these are the imponderable pieces that bring vitality and life to ourselves, but we must not underestimate them. We must give them their due and see what it is. In Morocco, we used to go and sit at the top edge of the Sahara. They used to go and they'd sit under the blankets of the almond trees, and we'd sit and eat almonds and drink mint tea and sing qasaid, sing these beautiful poems, and they'd get the dried figs. And they would take the dried figs, and someone would sit there and they'd take rocks and they'd pound these dried figs. And they would start out like all hard and, you know, like tough and dry and no flavor. And this guy would pound them, someone would pound them until they became like syrup. They'd become like jam, and they'd become almost like fresh figs again. But he'd bring some kind of energy into them, and, you know, by pounding them and like folding them and pounding and folding, and then he'd serve it like on a plate and send it out, and we'd have the almonds and the mint tea, and absolutely like divine. But that was that thing of imbuing this thing with life, you know? So the same thing with food, like the roti, you know, like it rises from the heat, and then you know how it's cooked very quickly. Anybody that doesn't know what I'm talking about, that bread? Yes.
Young women who are married do a lot of screaming at their husbands. There's a lot of screaming going on at their husbands. Can you speak on that?
There's lots of screaming from ladies at their husbands. Well, there's probably good reason for it. Yeah, here's the thing. Screaming is an attempt to like discharge a feeling and to express a feeling that needs to be expressed. Like I said yesterday, feelings that are not expressed don't just disappear. They have to be released in some means. Now they can be released feelings can be released like anger, joy, you name it, feelings, right? What are feelings? It's part of this thing I'm talking about, like the wave, the nervous system excitation, that wave that rises up. Right? Whatever it might be. Or, whatever it might be. Right? They all come up and they want to release. Now, most mammals, almost all animals, have a very similar practice. I mean, there are ways in which we can do it that are considered have more decorum than the animals. But we are mammals. And the same thing happens. It works the same way. Feelings come up, charges come up. Life force wants to express itself. Women scream at their husbands probably because the husbands have really been, I won't use the word. But the feelings are real, they have to be expressed. Now the Prophet ﷺ said, controlling your anger. He didn't say making your anger disappear or suppressing your anger. He said controlling your anger. In other words, management of your anger. I don't like using that term because it's like this whole modern connection, anger and management. But managing your feelings is important. Expressing your feelings is important. Like the Prophet, the companion, he said, I love that man, and the Prophet ﷺ said, go and tell him. Speak it. I love you. That will change what happens in his whole being. That's a release. So very often women tend to be all cultures tend to tell women, look, you're beautiful, be seen and not heard. And men tend to go on and on and on and on and on and on, like I'm doing. I don't want to do this, so I don't like talking, but men tend to go on and live in their head and talk about ideas and be very abstracted and disconnected from feeling. That's why I say men need to listen to their wives. That's, one of the biggest counsels I give. The Prophet ﷺ said, those of you who are the best to your wives and your families. Listen to your wives and listen to your children. Just listen to them. Don't fix anything. Don't feel you have to go out and do anything. No, just listen. And like I said, back to this concept of grounding and sensation, listen and just be with what you feel. Try to discover what you feel. Most men don't even know what they feel because most of it's been shut down. The range of subtlety of feeling, like I said, is no less than the range of things we find in the creation. The range of subtlety of feelings. Men who work in men's group get angry and cry. And they say, I'm sensitive, I've developed the feminine part of my being because I can cry. I have no problem crying. So that's not a problem with me. I feel, I can cry. No, that's not what it's about. It's not about crying and getting angry. It's about living presence and experiencing life with all of its subtlety. And the range of it is enormous. So men tend to not feel, women tend to feel, and so that disconnect becomes dramatic. In most cases, what happens over and over and over is, the conflict comes because the man is not, he wants to understand logically. The woman feels like she's being neglected, like he doesn't pay any attention to her, like he doesn't listen to her. And if she says anything like that, he'll disprove her. But that's not true. I was here yesterday and I don't know, blah, 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 and he'll have all these reasons and excuses that come from his brain as to why that's not true. So she's left with the feeling, oh, well, it's not true, then I must be really messed up. Sorry. Mm-hmm. Or she might say, well, he'll never understand. Or any kind of other endless permutations. Men are so subtle. I've been in situations where I've been called into a family. I had one group, a family that I was working with, father and 2 sons, and a woman severely depressed. Just so, oh, the poor woman. And all of them are saying, how do we help mom? How do I help my wife? They're all like, how do we make her better? She's so depressed, she's tried antidepressants, it doesn't work. How do we do it? Wallahi, I tell you, all 3 of those men were depressed. And they had it all hidden underneath, and they were saying, I'm fine. It's not my problem, it's her. And she was buying it. She was like expressing the pain and the depression for these 3 men who were living this life of self-buoyance and denial, not facing that they were like not feeling in their lives. They couldn't face grievous and sorrowful things. It was too painful for them. And that's another aspect of it. Men are sensitive, so sensitive they can't begin to process the emotions that women are really, women know it good, they've done it lots. The women, some of you women know what I'm talking about, right? So, yeah, but screaming does not satisfy or fulfill what wants to happen. And it wants to be full, free, generous expression of feelings at all times. That's a goal we should have. Anger. Men, how many men have anger? You know, some of the most angry men I know, they speak like this. Hi, how are you? Who, me angry? No, I'm always calm. Because, anger, the Prophet ﷺ said, control your anger. He said, didn't make it disappear. Feeling is something that happens that flows from the life of the being. In all cases, in all instances, it wants to be in our speech. How are you? And when you say, how are you with your whole being, it's free and the flow is free. And what wants to naturally come from us is generosity, kindness, rahmah, right? Assistance. That's what wants to come. But if we hold it back, it gets turned inwards, then we're lying to ourselves. We're not being whole. So the free expression of the energy that would inform anger, the energy is it's a Jalali energy. You all understand what I mean by Jalal? Anybody know? Jalal and Jamal. Jalal is the majestic, powerful aspect of Allah, but we see it in His creation. There's Jalal in His creation, and the Jamal is the sublime, the beautiful, the kind, the gentle, delicate, all of that. It's like these opposites. The Jalal is there in every one of us. But if we deny it, and only, then it's also then that energy that would be behind anger. Like, this is wrong. I will not stand for it. That kind of energy. If that energy is not free to flow, even when you're saying something nice, here's the thing. Once I was in Morocco, and I was with these men from the desert, amazing men from the desert. They were Sufis that did this thing we did a lot, in another manner. I didn't know any Arabic, and I was new. I'd just gone there. The first day I spent time amongst these. They were like these guys from the desert were like gnarly, is the term. Like their skin was like tree bark. They'd been out in the desert, and we were sitting in a circle, we were having a meal, and this one guy looked at me and he was speaking Moroccan Arabic or Berber or something. He was going, he was like, this stuff that was coming, like, whoa, I thought, what have I done? He was like looking at him and turning to his friend and saying, he was saying all these things like, and I said, what is he saying? And he's saying, you have the face of an angel. You're like the sweetness of the fragrance of a rose that's come from. And he went on and on with this incredibly beautiful stuff he was saying. But this is, This was the disposition with which he was dispensing it. And I thought, it was a surprise to me. I learned something from that. So expression must be full and complete and with your whole being, is what I'm saying. And when it is full and complete with your whole being, really anger can be expressed, your displeasure with something does not have to be expressed with explosiveness. And some people will hold the explosiveness forever, or some people, they'll just lose it and boom, it'll blow, right? So the free expression of it at all times means you address things appropriately at all times in relation to what they are, whether it's with tenderness or with firmness and,
This subtle healing, the subtle medicine that is practiced all the time, you could say, among people. I'm curious to know how your teacher in Pakistan, given the context of an Islamic culture and, Pakistani culture, how did he practice that subtle medicine? What did you observe about him in being with patients? Because there's a tendency perhaps for people to come and basically think that all he needs to do is hear my symptoms and write me a remedy and that's it. But there is a way that the healer is conveying the subtle medicine through the substance, through the interaction, through the words, through the silence.
By his manner, so to speak.
Yes. So how did you, and I'm interested because we would expect the real Hakim to be the one who has embodied the Sunnah and is walking it, living it, breathing it, and demonstrating it as a practitioner, as a friend, as a parent. And so I'd like, could you share something about what you observed?
Well, yesterday I mentioned this thing that, this idea that the Hakim is going to be the one that's walking, breathing the Sunnah. I mean, yes, that's true, inshallah, hopefully, but it doesn't work that way. I mean, one of the realities, like I said yesterday, one of the things my teacher said was, do not expect you're going to heal anybody. If you're in that, you're in the wrong business. You're healing yourself. And we all know, or many of us know, this concept of the wounded healer. I've never seen anybody in this business who is not coming from a place of having been wounded deeply, healing themselves, and in the process of doing that, recognizing that, right, it can be done, one, and I can do it for others, inshallah, and I can heal myself by that service to others. So every one of us, and every healer, and every sheikh is going to be one with fault of some kind, with weakness of some kind, with work that needs to be done, from the cradle to the grave, seeking knowledge. And what is that knowledge from the cradle to the grave? But growth and healing, change. It must continue. It must be an ongoing thing. They say the Prophet ﷺ made he said astaghfirullah at least 40 times a day. What was he asking forgiveness for? What was he he was the Quran walking, he was the perfect human being. So what is he asking forgiveness for? Was he doing something wrong? What was he asking forgiveness for? One sheikh said, because every time Allah raised him to a new maqam, a new higher station, he asked forgiveness for being satisfied with something less than what Allah had designed for him. Allah. So we are in a process that doesn't end. So we won't be, I talk about hikmah, but I make no claims whatsoever. I tell you, do you see what I'm saying? So my teacher was the same. He had his foibles. He had his unique personality. But he had this other ability to be sensitive to people's feelings. That I know. To recognize people's feelings and to be there with them. And the one place I saw it most, one of the things I learned from him most was he taught me, he said and he was like, to me it was like a secret. But it wasn't one of those secrets that's obvious, but it's kind of overlooked, like we don't give it its due. And all you women are I make a lot of friends with women when I do give these things. because they hear me saying things that they know and they just don't hear people speak. One of them is that having a baby and raising a child is not an easy thing to do. It's almost an impossible task given in the world in which we live in today. And so one of the things, the sensitivity that he demonstrated is I'd see a woman come to him. How many times I'd see women come to him and they'd just had a baby or they had a small child, and they would know that he would recognize that they're exhausted, totally exhausted. And they're exhausted emotionally and nutritionally depressed from that exhaustion. And he would explain to them, he'd say, you're tired, you've had this, you don't get to. He would recognize it, and they would recognize that he knew that. And he would tell me, they need to get some nutritional support. Give them alfalfa, give them good food, give them something that can help them in the situation that's impossible for them. He had this sensitivity of being with people, to feel what was going on and to be with them to see what it was they needed. And like I said yesterday, one of his biggest medicines would be when he would see that they had no serious illness and that they just needed to do some work based on the guidance he had given them, he'd say, you'll be all right. And they would go, oh, God. And you could see that was their medicine. They'd have that exhale breath of relaxation that I'm talking about, and the letting go. And they would trust him. They would trust that when he said, you'll be all right, and that was this powerful medicine. But he was speaking the truth too, because he knew they would be all right. And that his telling them also helped them in being all right. But this thing I want to get back to is one of these things, this thing about mothers, people, all of you women out there that have children, a lot of you have children. I reiterate this over and over and over. Our setup is not okay. It's not okay. We're not addressing something basic to our community as human beings. A mother cannot raise a child alone. A mother can not hardly raise a child with even a husband that carries the baby and does all that stuff at night. Do you know that Imam Khomeini, as much as controversy about Imam Khomeini, do you know that he taught, that his wife said that he never, ever even asked her to get him a glass of water all the time they were together. Not even a glass of water. Never asked him to ever. Never asked her to do one thing. And he taught all of his students to do the same. He changed the diapers of the baby, he carried the baby, he took care of the baby, and he instructed all of his students to do the same. That's just a curious piece. But what I'm saying, we do not understand, you single mothers and you mothers with children who are not single, who have husbands that help you out. It's still impossible because we don't live in a setting that we're designed to live in as human beings. Like I said, with the 13-year-old from next door that holds the baby for how long and plays with it, with the aunt that's there, with the grandmother that's there, with the neighbors, with the rest of the people around us, and for the baby to experience other human beings and to learn what it's about to connect with each other and not be isolated. Half of what goes on in terms of violence in the world has to do with people feeling separate from each other. In Malaysia, anyone from Malaysia? Do you all know this? In Malaysia, there's a practice they do with little babies. And all the members of the community make a circle at some point. And they do this more than once. They do this over and over. They take the baby, and each member of the community holds the baby and makes the prayer on the Prophet. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad. They sing a little prayer on the Prophet, and then they give it to someone else. And they, Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina. And everybody holds this baby in their arms, next to them, and sings prayer on the Prophet. And they do it regularly, over and over. That's just a custom. So he behaved as he was an incredibly sensitive person. I saw that. He was a very clean person. Another Hakim I had, he said, well, you want to learn medicine? He said, okay, show me how you make wudu. And I made wudu, and he said, and then he didn't say anything, and then he made wudu. And, it wasn't that it was more thorough. I think it was just more present, personally, but that's the way it began. So the sunnah has in it and contains in it healing. the more we live with it, the more we recognize it and can identify it with our cognitive, anthropologically informed, cultural awareness, whatever. Do you know what I mean? I grew up, I went to spend a lot of time in Morocco, and I lived with people who would not eat from an individual plate. There were people there, if you gave them a single plate, they would say, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. I'm not going to eat from this plate. Because of the hadith, the Prophet said, the one that eats alone eats with shaitan. So they'd take the plate and say, eat with me, get somebody else. But they used to, the custom in Morocco was eat from a single platter. So my children were raised like that. My children were raised sitting on the ground. That means that we didn't have tables that when they were little, they had to they were out of their reach. It meant that when they were on the ground and they came up to us and we're sitting on the ground, they were at our level all times. When we ate together, we ate from a single plate. When they got to be 15 or 20, most of them started saying, Dad, couldn't we get a table and some plates? But nevertheless, it was a foundational thing that they experienced. Yeah, and I had to, I did get a table and plates. I don't like it. I'd rather eat from one. Traditionally, the Prophet ﷺ, at that time, they ate with their fingers and they ate from what's in front of him. Ya Walid, the Prophet ﷺ said, oh, young boy, young man, eat from what is in front of you. And the adab of eating together. There's an adab of clipping your nails, of eating what's there in front of you, of not putting the bones back in the plate. There's all kinds of this subtle adab, right? But there's a communion that happens. There's a sharing and there's an energy reality that's dramatic. It's powerful. That's medicine. That's medicine. We don't do it anymore. And I encourage it. I used to do a lot of work with non-Muslim teenagers in high schools. I used to go to high schools and I'd talk to them about Islam. And then they were so interested about it in Islam. At that time I lived at Dar al-Islam in New Mexico, and it was kind of a tourist site because it's this beautiful buildings, traditional Islamic style. So part of what I'd do is we'd get these teenagers to come to the mosque and do a tour and learn more about Islam. And part of what we would do is we'd prepare meals for them. And we'd serve them, and I'd explain to them the tradition, the sunnah of eating from one plate, and explain to them, and I'd give them the option if they wanted to eat it. And a lot of people will not do it. They do not want to do it, eat from a single plate. And a lot of them, so they had the opportunity to eat on individual plates. But most of the young teenagers really, really loved it. They loved doing it. It was a curiosity for them, and of course they went back to, eating their McDonald's and fries from the bag too. But these things of the sunnah are medicine. The Hakims, when they talk about digestion, my teacher talked about digestion, and he said, remember that digestion is not assimilation of food and the breaking down of elements, etc., etc. It is transmutation of one substance from one realm, one kingdom, into another kingdom. You are moving things from the vegetable kingdom to the animal human kingdom, and not only to the human kingdom, to your kingdom. Right? Do you understand what I mean? It's transmutation. It's moving from one realm of creation to another realm. So that was just like the plant comes forth from the minerals and the water. Maybe this is a Chinese medicine stuff, right? The plant comes forth from the mineral world into the plant realm by virtue and the assistance of the light of the sun. And he said the food comes from the animal realm and the vegetable realm, or the mineral if it comes to it, from that realm into the human realm and into your own personal realm by virtue of the light of the self.
I have to repeat that.
Okay, the whole thing. Just as the plant comes forth from the mineral realm with water into the vegetable realm by the light of the sun, your nutrition comes from the animal and the vegetable world into your being and your kingdom by virtue of the light of the self. That's why eating a meal with appetite is better than eating. It's haram to eat without an appetite. And you know food, if you're not hungry, if you eat food that's, you're not. Ibn Sina says the digestion happens, he says the food is taken into a healthy body the way the lion takes the gazelle. You know that. You know when you're hungry, how good the food feels. And you know when you're hungry, how, you can digest pretty much anything. Nails and bricks. I'm so hungry I could eat bricks and straw, So it takes hold of it, but it transmutes it. And it's not a little thing, because you're not only transmuting that substance into the human, moving it into the human realm, you're moving it into your realm, and you're making it you. You're, with those carrots, you're reconstructing your peculiar, unique nose. Fingers, bones, nail, You're recreating this thing that's you, again and again and again, with this food. It's awesome. Is it not awesome? Carrots and tahini, and, and it becomes Hakim. Wow. And anything that does not become you fully and successfully, and this is not only in the realm of nutrition, this is in the realm of all what you experience. Anything that does not successfully become you and become integrated with you is poison. Poison is anything that you cannot assimilate and make it your own, make it integrated, negotiate it, make it part of your being, successfully move it into your locus and place, or eliminate. Real poisons are anything you cannot assimilate or eliminate. Right? That's what a poison is. It's not a specific thing. I mean, you can eat if you're strong enough, you could probably eat McDonald's and subdue it. If you're providing, you have the energy and the light of the strength of the self to transmute that into like good flesh and bone, teeth, nails, and eyes and hairs, and your peculiar nose. If you have the energy to do that and eliminate what you don't need, that's a strength too, a strength of eliminating that what you don't need. That's possible. But it's harder, it is, than other foods. It's going to be harder. Likewise, so anything you cannot assimilate or eliminate becomes toxic. The word tox, right, comes from the Greek word which means arrow, pierced by an arrow. An arrow is a real toxin. It goes, right? It displaces you. You cannot digest it, assimilate it. You can't assimilate it. It's too sharp and too hard. And you can't eliminate it that easily. A Mack truck coming down the road, bam, displaces you rapidly. That's extremely toxic. So anything that you cannot integrate and make into your own, same with experience and people. How to some people you're with, and at some point you think, I got to get away from this person. Right? Because there's an energy, and it doesn't mean necessarily that they're bad people, but it means there's some kind of energy that you cannot assimilate or eliminate. No, it may be other things too. I mean, there's all kinds of other problems. But I'm saying it's true of what you see, what you read, what you smell, what you hear. Right? Same principles. And it's all nutritious or toxic, depending. So when people say, people used to say to me, well, such as plant food, is that good for you? And I say, well, it all depends. I mean, yeah, it might be good for you. Good means it will nourish you and you need it. The Prophet ﷺ had favorite foods. I met some Hakims who their practice consisted of using just the foods that the Prophet ﷺ favored. And they used 5 things. Salt. The Prophet ﷺ said he was to humanity as salt was to food. Salt was one. Honey. Quran refers to honey as there's a healing in it for you, Quran says. Milk. Prophet ﷺ drank quaffed milk, right? I mentioned that yesterday. He sipped water. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Sipped water. People who know me know I almost never drink water. If I drink water, I sip a little bit. But I quaff milk. I love milk. Whole, preferably natural milk. Goat's milk, camel's milk. I mean, cow's milk is most available, but goat's milk is good milk. Each one has different qualities. Fresh whole milk is warm and moist. And it's very favorably hydrating. You know, it will hydrate very effectively, providing you can manage it. If you don't have the enzyme for digesting it, then you can't do it. It will be toxic. But that's a disturbance. I mean, you want to sustain the ability to digest milk from childhood, from the mother's milk. I mean, it's the first food we eat. Mammals. So these are the 5 foods. So we've got salt, honey, right? Milk, vinegar was another favorite food, right? Salt, milk, honey, vinegar, and olive oil. Now those are the 5 things that these Hakims used for all different ailments. And they're all traditional foods. All of the substances mentioned in Quran are potentially, they're archetypal. I mean, that is, they fit in the spectrum of things in the creation. They're found at very various points, very specifically in a spectrum of possible things, from stones to basil, rehan. Do you know? So all of those things are potential medicines or foods or meaningful things in the creation for us. But you know, these Hakims took these 5 things, and traditionally, you look at using these, they make up traditional medicine, and they can be used in different ways. Honey and milk mixed, for example, extremely warm and moist. Talk about nutrition for someone undernourished, it's powerful. In terms of real getting warm, the warm and moist, it's not up there anymore, the warm and moist aspect in terms of food, nothing better than honey and milk. Vinegar and honey is one of the old, what is it called, hydromel. And anybody know the Greek, traditional Greek? I mean, that was one of the medicines of the Greeks. Vinegar and honey mixed for cleaning, for removing mucus, balgam, for detoxifying. Salt and vinegar together. Liver, stomach, tonic, all these things. Anyway, so those are all foods. And in a healthy person, balance of the body, hot, cold, wet, and dry, can be affected by the right choice of hot, cold, wet, and dry foods. And if you're in tune with your body, and if you understand the creation elementally, you naturally want to do this. And you'll have cravings particularly for natural things that you will be needed to keep that balance. Now, if you're sick, you may crave your poison. That's another thing my teacher taught, which is the inclination tends to be, if you chronically crave something, this is one of the teachings in the school of the Mufaradat, the simples. If you chronically crave something, it tends to be a poison. It's an addiction, and so you're stuck. You're stuck in a cycle of need and replenishing the need, and it's a mistake that the system is involved in, that you're involved in. So if you crave salt, if you crave sweets, whatever it is, there's something else that it's trying to satisfy. There's something, so it's a mistake. So a general rule is this: chronic cravings tend to be poisons. Unusual cravings tend to be medicines. And he said, my teacher said, if you have unusual cravings, recognize the unusual craving as a medicine and go for it. And in the school of the Mufaradat, when you crave, for example, once every 2 or 3 years, I'll crave beets. I don't really like beets that much. They're too sweet, too heavy feeling to me. But every 2 or 3 years, I have this craving for beets. And if I have that craving, he said, not to eat lots of it. So another principle of healing with foods is you don't eat just 1 or 2, you eat lots. So like for the kidney, and certain foods correspond to certain organs in certain parts of the body. So I mentioned peaches for the liver yesterday, did I? Peaches for the liver, watermelon for the kidneys, cherries and grapes for the blood and the lungs, apricots for the lower intestines. So these foods, traditionally, in the school of Mufaradat. Now, so back to the medicine of the Prophet, he ate very few things, but he had these things that were favored. And he favored things like vinegar, strangely enough. He liked vinegar and said it was a natural thing to eat with food. And it was traditionally bread and vinegar for people in that time. I mean, that's a meal. But do we think of that as a meal? Bread with some vinegar. Yeah.
Foods, are they always black and white where there's a problem, we automatically take this food or this herb? Like in homeopathy, a lot of the remedies are based on constitution, so even if you give the same remedy to two different people, they're going to act differently. So would this follow with these foods?
Well, most of the foods that are used in terms of the mufaradat are specifics, yes. So generally speaking, if you have problems with the liver, but this is not true of all foods. I mean, not all foods have been identified as to their specific use, but in the tradition, generally speaking, a particular food is recognized as being beneficial in general for that particular organ, part of the body, etc. The ones I just gave the correspondences to, those are considered pretty much across the board. So, I use those foods, for example, almonds for people who families have cancer. That's an across the board. Your family has cancer, eat 3 almonds. My teacher used to say, eat 3 almonds every day. Not more than that, but every day, 3 almonds. So it was like that. And so some of them are more than others. Other foods, it's, for example, all the birds are good for the lungs. This is another kind of way it's indicated. It's a little more general. They will nourish the lungs. And there will be in the birds some kind of energy, again, like the mufradat energy, that may benefit whatever problems may be happening with lungs as well. In the creation, you see this, there's something called the doctrine of signatures. You know the doctrine of nutrition. You know the doctrine of signatures is based on this idea that in Allah's creation, what something is useful for is kind of written on it. So like there's a plant called eyebright that's good for the eyes, that's used traditionally for the eyes and right? And if you look at it, it's got its little eyes. It's like, do you know what I mean? Or in homeopathy, there's a plant called bryonia that's used for constipation, for holding, and for people who hold on, that are afraid to let go and let loose. Bryonia is a plant that grows, it's a vine, and it grows like this around something. And after it's done that, then it grows like this around something. It really holds on. So it's a signature. Or they say like watermelon has a great signature for kidney. Here's this great huge thing filled with cells, filled with fluid in this stringy vine. You see what I'm saying? It's written in the kind of form of it. It's kind of written that it's for the kidneys. Or they say walnuts for the brains, or apples for the heart. So the doctrine of the signatures is one of those things that's been present. I'm not saying it's a sunnah, but I'm saying it's present in traditional medicine. And yes.
For the pancreas? What fruit is good for the pancreas?
Fruit for the pancreas? Not specifically, no. But the kidney stuff, I would say, first of all. At least. Yeah.
Do you use those simple remedies in your practice? The vinegar, the milk, the honey, the olive oil? Yeah, I'll use them.
I use everything I've gathered and gleaned through the years in various ways, depending on what comes to me. Jamun fruit, by the way, for the pancreas. Anybody know jamun fruits? If you're from, nobody knows jamun fruit? You know jamun. If you're from India or Pakistan, jamun. They're little purple things that grow high and way. They grow in Santa Barbara, California, too. I found trees of jamun just pouring out. No one knows what they are. They're just unknown. Yes?
How do you reconcile organic versus halal in terms of like you're doing in Washington DC and you go to halal and you know what the meat comes from in terms of
That's a good
what the
question.
energy is, and you just say this is wrong when you eat the meat if you need the meat for your health.
Okay. So the question, did everybody hear that question? I think it's a really important and it's a good one. The question was, well, actually, I didn't hear it precisely. How do you reconcile organic and halal in terms of medicine? halal, I mean, the Quran wants us to eat the pure food that's tayyib, that's okay. Most of the meat that people zabiha, it's not acceptable meat. That's how I reconcile it. It's not acceptable. I will not eat it if I have a choice. I mean, I will, again, what you cannot assimilate or eliminate, you know what I mean? And if a Muslim feeds it to me, already Allah's generosity and His mercy covers it and takes, makes it okay, especially if I'm their guest, right? But in terms of my own choice, I won't eat that. I won't eat meat that's raised the way it's raised and fed the way it's fed and poisoned the way it's poisoned and distorted and, tortured the way they're tortured. Chickens that, have too many legs and if they grow to maturity have tumors in every one of them. I mean, I'm sorry if saying Bismillah Allahu Akbar or making it zabiha may help, but I still don't think it's good to eat it like that. So what we need is organic and halal. I mean, hello. I mean, some people have made the effort and you'll find it some places. In the Bay Area, there's people do it. Where I happen to live, I live where we have our animals grow in the backyard. Or our neighbors, they're available. So it's pretty important. And I know in New Mexico, there were some people that were going to, there's a chicken farm in southern New Mexico called Pollo Real. Is it Pollo Real? I think it's called Pollo. And she went down there, she's Muslim, she had a restaurant, she went down there and she came back with this report about these beautiful, wonderful chickens. They're supposed to be beautiful. My friends in Berkeley, Chloe and Hasib, anybody know, Chloe and Hasib? Chloe and Hasib, my friends in Berkeley, they have chickens that are absolutely beautiful chickens. The feathers, chickens are supposed to be beautiful. And they have beautiful chickens and they have beautiful eggs. And they had a rooster that was crowing, and you're not allowed to have roosters that crow in Berkeley. And she killed this rooster, right? And she had it in the pot, and she was telling me about it, and there was a knock at the door, and we went to the door, and it was the health inspector saying, "You've got a rooster here, and we're here to tell you can't have this rooster anymore." And she had this thing in the pot. Now, how about that? Does that satisfy your requirements here? Anyway, yeah. So I think it's pretty important, and it's a piece that's overlooked by Muslims, that to be zabiha alone is really not enough. And some Muslims I know prefer to go for organic food and say Bismillah over it, organic meat, than eating the other kind of meat, especially if something like beef, I should think. In New Mexico, there's a lot of wild animals. People eat elk and. So yeah, I think it's I don't reconcile. I say yes, it should be organic, and halal. Yeah.
A lot of the remedies that are prescribed in Islamic medicine, are they will they work? The effectiveness of them, does it depend on how how you're eating, in terms of do you need to if someone came to you with cancer and you prescribe some for them to take the almonds or whatever, but their whole diet has been the non-organic meats and a lot of processed foods and things like that. Does it depend on how much does it depend on whether or not your body is rid of those a lot of the processed foods and the things that are food coloring and things like that?
Well, the thing about health, again, back to this principle, the question was, traditionally foods that are used by some of the traditional hakims, how effective are they if a person is, doing lots of things that are way out of balance? Is that in essence what you're saying? Eating foods that are processed, et cetera, et cetera. And yeah, it's pretty important. Remember that when we talk about health, that the meaning of the word, remember that health. And it's so hard to get across to people. We live in an age and in a place where people have this idea that I'm going to get this panacea. If I get the right medicine, I'm going to be well. Or the idea alone, You know, I mean, a lot of these diets come along. A lot of people have this idea: if I eat particular things and in a particular way, I'm going to be well. You know, and that's one aspect of the whole story. Whole health, whole. Every aspect of one's life is, and this is one of the things that Ibn Sina, traditionally the Hakims all stressed, and it's really something that the prophets all brought as well. The core of it is how you are with Allah and yourself, and then how you are with your neighbors. So it's the whole story, and most people, I mean, the one single thing besides eating that we here in this society have just an impossible time, and you don't know how many times I have close friends, and I have what I would call clients, students, people who understand what I'm telling them, and they believe it, and they believe what I'm telling them, and I tell them this over and over and over and over, year after year after year, and they still don't do it. And that is, become sufficiently active to be healthy physically. Because the age again conspires against it. Yeah, I should be out, yeah, I should do something to get into shape, they say. And yeah, you say that every year, and after 5 years, you're in a very different place. After 10 years, you're sick. After 15 years, it's hard to regain it. I tell you, you can regain physical health, you know, anytime before the age of 40 is pretty easy, and you can still do it after the age of 40. I'm still doing it. I mean, I have ups and downs, but I, you know, get back into my physical activity. But we don't walk. I mean, so what do we do? How do we compensate for the fact that we don't even walk, let alone cut wood, let alone carry wood? People who are very active in the world, people who spend a lot of time in computers, whatever it might be, people who do a lot of work with people, whatever, I mean, people who are intelligent and sustain high-level activities also find a way, whether it's at a gym, you know, or in some kind of sport or activity, they find some way to stay physically active. And they make that part of their important schedule. Yeah, they have to have this appointment and this consultation with this, you know, such a business in this world as it exists today. They have it at that time, but before that they have this. And that may be, whatever, swimming. I recommend swimming. Swimming is a really good exercise. Ibn Sina and the traditional Hakims recommend swimming. You know, it's in water and it's like full range of motion. The problem with a lot of exercise, machines, you know, there always will be a machine. This is a machine. It's an awesome machine that Allah designed. And it's designed to do, like I say, dancing, I mean, I'm sorry, dancing of any kind is good exercise. Especially if there's music that's enjoyable.
Techno is good. Techno is good.
What?
Dancing techno.
Well, I mean, to be honest, I used to rave all night because I like to dance all night. And I could feel it in the morning. And I'd pass through these stages of getting tired after the first 3 or 4 hours. And then you pass through that. And then the second couple of, 3 or 4 hours, and then you move right on through it until your body is totally in this. I mean, yeah, it's a techno beat, but it doesn't stop. The music doesn't stop. That's why I enjoyed it, to be honest. I'm not recommending it to you, but I'm saying that was good for me. Do you know what I mean? And at the age of 57, 58, it invigorated me. You know? The body is awesome. It remains awesome. And like I said, did I tell you all about the man I met in Pakistan who was like 90 and then I met his grandfather? They used to run. You know, that's the way they dealt with, if they got sick of it, they just get out and run. But they were tall, thin, lanky, flexible, agile. They were like cheetahs anyway. Human cheetahs, you know what I mean? You know, that kind of quality of. So how do you get someone to go out and exercise? I mean, I have one family, and and they're good clients, and I've treated them homeopathic. We've gone through many serious illnesses and keep their family well and healthy. And I keep coming to the same thing, and they say, "Yeah, we've got to get out and exercise." They still don't do it. They still don't do it, and they know they cannot be well with it. So back to what I was saying. yes, medicine is the almonds. Again, what I was saying, he said, my teacher said, if it's in your family, it doesn't mean that if you have cancer and you eat almonds, you're going to get over the cancer. You know. But if you have it in your family, he said, there's no harm in eating a few almonds every day as a preventative. Allahu Alam. But back to this thing, health means whole. And everything in your life takes part in it. You cannot be well. It's that story of Rumi tells the story about the man who's sick and every physician that comes can't find the healing. And then one physician comes and says, that's because, I think it's a woman in the story. Do you know the story in the Matnavi? She's in love with someone she's separated from in some other city. And you know, and that's a metaphor for, you know, the basic illness that afflicts us all is our separation from Allah. But that's reiterated by our separation from Mother. It's reiterated by our separation from the womb, which we either successfully renegotiate or don't. By our separation from Mom, which we either successfully renegotiate or don't, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And at this point in time, we can, back to what I was saying, how do you your question, well, how do we renegotiate that sense of fullness, completion, connection, and wholeness? Closeness to Allah, closeness to ourselves, closeness to each other. It comes from our own heart. Starts by being close to Allah. But then comes from the next stage of really feeling close to other people and really feeling love for other people. And getting it in return because of that. Even if it's the person in a video store that you see for 10 minutes. Because it happens in all places. So we take our break?